Right then, we'll start our service. Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the people who are joining us for the first time as well. Obviously, this is via Zoom, and it's the first time we've done it, so bear with us. It's very nerve-wracking. And can I just ask you that if you've got any devices, any phones or anything else that are around or near what you're using, could you just make sure they're switched off, please, so we don't get any interference? Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome our speakers for this evening. We have Liz Wellham-Daly and Denise Cutting. I'm now going to ask Liz to open our service in prayer, and this is going to be followed by the healing prayer, which is something that we're doing now that's quite new and nice. And instead of the silence, some music will be played, and during this time it will be for your own contemplation, for the people that you know need healing, for our beautiful troubled world, our animals, the people in our healing book, in our church and on our computer, and obviously the ones in all the other churches as well. So that will take place after the healing prayer, which Liz will speak. Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. Please join me in prayer. Divine Spirit, vibrant light which shines within us, as we join together, we give thanks for this unity tonight and for your strength, which we know we can rely on. Thank you for this life we have, which we have been given, a life which is forever changing, growing, and continuing when our physical bodies fall away. As we struggle at times to understand the pain and suffering of humanity, may we be ever mindful of those who are in turmoil at this time. Keep us strong and optimistic, safe in the knowledge that love conquers all. We send our thoughts to those who are grieving for the loss of their loved ones, those who have taken their transition to their new and continuous life. God, your natural law is always shown to be relied upon by the abundance of the new growth of spirit in nature which never fails. Help us to be more humble and more mindful of sustaining the natural world which we could not exist without. For the earth allows us to live a fruitful life, and we must nurture it. Please guide those who have within their power to make a difference, to be more aware of the protection of the earth over material greed. And those animals of our world are here to be loved and nurtured, to be treated with the highest regard by all those who inhabit the earth. Let us accept with humility forgiveness from nature. As we grow in the spiritual and physical existence in which we live, hold us in your light. Help us to make the best of all the gifts and the treasures we have been given by you. Amen.
Amen.
These are the words of the healing prayer. Gracious Spirit of thy goodness, hear our anxious prayer. Take our loved ones who are suffering 'neath thy tender care. Loving Father, hear us, hear us. Gracious Spirit, may thy presence shed a healing ray, turning all their nights of darkness into glorious day. Loving Father, hear us, hear us. Gracious Spirit, shouldst thou claim them, be their light and guide. Lead them to the heavenly kingdom, safely by thy side. Loving Father, hear us, hear us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Liz, for that beautiful, heartfelt prayer. Really, really beautiful. Our first reading of the evening is taken from the philosophy of SNU Spiritualism, and it regards our fifth principle, personal responsibility. The state of the world is not inevitable and beyond our control. And rather than mere acceptance of the status quo, we have the power to drive forward the changes we see as beneficial. We simply need the will to do so. We should be aware that it's not only what we do that is important, but also the intention behind the action. Our responsibility is to try as hard as possible to be the very best we can, yet we must never demand of ourselves more than we are capable of achieving. We should always remember that we are human, with all the limitations to be expected of the physical state. Our constrained knowledge and understanding of the force we call God and of his intentions for us mean that we will never be condemned for failure. Personal responsibility gives us the strength to take command of our lives whilst realising that we are important in God's plan. There is no such thing as someone born into a life without purpose, but to recognise that purpose and to do what is inherently right takes time and courage to implement. From the highest to the lowest, all are equal in the eyes of God. All are capable of great deeds of love and compassion, or of creating trouble and strife. There is no fundamental difference between ordinary people and the great teachers of life. Those teachers who change the thinking of communities and society, and whose message has often reached the wider world in order to change mankind. These great masters, having recognised the task they had been given them to perform, proceeded to take responsibility for their role in the fulfilment of God's plan. The concept of personal responsibility sets SNU spiritualist philosophy apart from any other religious beliefs. By accepting the idea we sow what we reap, we move away from the percept that we can be redeemed from sin. We are not left at the mercy of a vengeful God, needing to be saved by some agency that will intercede on our behalf. By accepting responsibility for what we do, say, and think, we accept the great respect that God has shown us. This God of love, justice, and honour bestows these same qualities upon us. We come to understand that respect for ourselves, our fellow beings, and the Great Spirit is fundamental for our progression. We recognise that all human life, whatever its gender or background, has been created by the God energy. Those who seek to deny the rights and opportunities of any section within humankind do themselves, their fellow beings, and God an injustice. We must always defend the right of people to be given respect and to be allowed to think and to act for themselves. We can make decisions for only one life, our own, but personal progress can be enhanced by the manner in which we relate to others and interact with all those we meet, however fleetingly, on our journey through life. God has entrusted us with personal responsibility. Let us endeavour to live up to his trust and our highest ideals and purpose. Thank you so much for listening. I would like to invite Denise to give us her address. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you for that lovely reading. It nicely fits in, fortunately, with what I was hoping to talk about tonight, which isn't actually specifically about personal responsibility, but it comes very close And can I just say hello to those who joined since the service began? Sorry, we put everybody on mute so that we can carry on regardless, and just plough on. So lovely to see you both. You know who you are. What I was thinking about for tonight's address, I think we've all been very aware of the huge changes that have been going on over the last 3 to 4 months. And it made me think about the question that somebody put to me the other day, which was, what's been going on for you during lockdown? And I have to say, it really set me to think, because lockdown has been so weird, wacky, wonderful, all sorts of adjectives I could use. But one of the first things that occurred to me, and it's probably the same for most of us, is about the impact of self-isolation, or not, as the case may be. Because I think for many of us, there have been a significant loss in what I'd call our day-to-day resources, particularly access to our friends, our family, our church, and the normal life and routines that go with that. And even to things like shopping and access to other services. Now we're coming out of lockdown, I'm hearing people say, yay, great, I've been to the hairdressers, can't wait for my hairdressing appointment. I had occasion to go to the dentist the other day, which was a huge relief, and the chiropodist, which was an even bigger relief. But there are so many other things that we've had to do without. And I think one of the big ones that I've seen people talking about and reading about is the lack of some of our normal rituals of life and death. The number of people who haven't been able to be present at a baby's birth, or grandparents who haven't been able to hug their newly arrived grandchildren and their own children. The fact that as people have passed away, whether through the virus or not, quite so many people haven't been able to share those last moments with their loved ones. Some have been able to and have been quite fortunate in that. But the people who haven't been able to say their farewells at funerals and cremations, either because the numbers of those who can attend have been reduced, or because the people who need to be there can't travel, and therefore the passage of life has had to be unattended. People have found ways around it because we're always resourceful and have lined the streets as a cortege has gone past. But even so, they've not actually been there to share in those rites. On a happier note, well, not a happier note for those involved, but people have had to cancel marriages and baptisms and all sorts of things, family celebrations for birthdays and significant anniversaries and so on. And for all them, I think it's been very difficult because there hasn't been that normality, that routine to be able to ensure that what's going on is relevant to them. So I think as we come out of lockdown or go into non-lockdown, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have to find new and different ways of making those celebrations. Some have been able to do them by routes like this on social media, but a lot of people haven't. And I think, you know, it's all well and good for people to be saying, yay, great, I've been able to see my loved ones. But I think we do need to remember that there are others for whom this time hasn't necessarily been as happy for them as for other people. And I'm not saying people shouldn't celebrate. I think we just need to recognise that there's been a whole range of experiences during that time. How do we feel about it? I mean, one of the big things that struck me is almost the inevitability of change over the last few months. Do we feel that we trust those who are making the laws and regulations and rules, that it's for the best? Do we hate the feeling of isolation? Do we think it might be sensible for some but not for others? But how do we feel about being fed up or feeling left out with some of the new labels that have been given to us? You know, are we shielding? Are we vulnerable? Are we at risk? Are we key workers? And as soon as you mention key workers, everybody, new groups come in saying, but I'm a key worker as well. There's a huge thing where people feel left out by the terminology that's used with one group or another. I'm furloughed. I'm still not quite sure I understand that one. I'm a key worker. I'm working from home. Which of the many groupings that have come into common usage do we feel that might apply to us and to our loved ones? And what's lockdown meant? Some people, I think, have been feeling quite abandoned, isolated, in need of more company. Indeed, needing some of the old structures and routines that we haven't been able to experience for several months now. You know, dance halls closed, singing groups shut down, all the things that we might have done as part of our common bonding with other human beings, we may not have continued to have access to because of the rules about lockdown. So I think during the last 3 months, it's felt to me that change is inevitable. And I don't think that's going to change for a period yet until everybody is certain that everyone is safe to go about their normal business, whatever normal business may be in the future with some of the changes that have come around during coronavirus. So perhaps what's important to bear in mind is how it affects us now. And that led me to think a lot about the inevitability of change within spiritualism, and particularly since the beginning of new spiritualism, modern spiritualism, back in the 19th century. And how's that affected where we are now and how we might need to consider moving on into the future? Julie talked about personal responsibility, and I think that is a big one, that we have to be responsible ourselves for everything that we do. But the other one that has occurred to me is a big issue for us, is the one about eternal progress open to every soul. And I thought, well, yeah, you know, spiritualism has changed a huge amount since it became into being as modern spiritualism. Spiritualism has existed since the dawn of time, that mankind, or womankind in some cases, has had the opportunity to talk with spirit, to pass on messages from spirit. It's not for nothing that there was the Delphi Oracle back in, you know, way back when. But we have a message about eternal progress being open to every living soul on virtually every wall of virtually every single spiritualist church up and down the land, but I'm not sure we really think about what it means. If we go back to those pioneers who came around in the 19th century, you know, the likes of the Fox sisters, of Estelle Hardinge Britten, of all the great and goods who came of that age, they lived with the constant change that brought about the difference from the communication through tapping, through communication of talking philosophy, talking mediumship, of how to give an address. And those addresses would be delivered to thousands of people within, you know, a theatre or a hall, and people would be entranced. They would go there to learn about the philosophy. And it was through that sort of thing that the spiritualist movement began. It started in America, it moved over to the UK and elsewhere, and is now centred across the world. But have we changed much since then? Do we take much account of the history that our pioneers brought to us, both in terms of their own lives, their own sacrifices to serve spirits, but also the way that they looked at different ways of communicating with spirits, and how they were part of the huge social change that went on from the 19th century onwards. Many were involved with the suffragette movement, with the Industrial Revolution, you know, it was all there as part of a package. Change wasn't just about one thing in life, it was about the whole life. It was about everything that God had created, whether you believe in him as God or the divine spirit or great creator, whatever. And it was the intelligence of that spirit, along with the intelligence of man, that meant that we were able to come up with the sort of devices that aid us in everyday communication. At the beginnings of this, we didn't have the telephone, the telegraph, the television, you know, all the things that enable us to communicate today were all brought on from that time through the intelligence that spirit passed to those early scientists, pioneers, that meant that we ended up with electricity and telegraph systems and all the rest of it. That means we can communicate with spirits in the same way that we do now, but that we also have an understanding of how those communications happen. And now it would seem to me that although we've closed the doors to our church, not through our own will, but because of the necessity of what's been going on, we're again finding new ways to communicate. We're having to use social media like this to be able to talk to our congregations, as many as we can. We can also experience the services that are going on in the four corners of the world. We can have speakers from Australia and Canada and wherever else dropping in to give services to congregations over here. Now, at one level, I find that hugely scary. But at another level, I'm thinking, well, if that's the case, what is the virus and everything else that's going on? What's the opportunities that we can grab from that to take us forward further? Because I think we're all aware that congregations are diminishing, membership is diminishing. But some of the churches who've been using this sort of mechanism for contact have really been in a situation where they have found lots of new people dropping in to a YouTube or a Zoom or a whatever service, but they wouldn't necessarily have thought of going into a church because they don't consider themselves churchgoers. Well, hey, if nothing else, the spiritualist movement has never been that conformist that we haven't welcomed people from any and all or no religion, because what we provide is a way of looking at life. We don't provide a whole set of commandments and say, if you don't do that and don't do that, or if you do that, you do that, you'll be sent to that other place that we don't believe in. Because it's then about our personal responsibility of how we live our lives. And I can't remember the exact words that Julie used in her reading, but there is something about the old saying is, to err is human, to forgive is divine. And I think, you know, a lot of us have probably very unwittingly done things that when looked back upon, we think, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't done that. But we don't have to beat ourselves up about it. We can make the choice that makes the difference to move on. And if we decide not to rectify it at that particular moment, then I don't think God is going to come swooping down and do anything horrible to us. I think he has the patience to wait until we're in the right time and the right space to understand the right way forward. And then he, she, spirit, whatever you want to call it, is there to put us back on the right track. I heard somebody say the other day that I won't say which church or which minister it was, but was saying, well, we really like to make people as uncomfortable as possible every now and then, because it's that helps change, because people are then have to think about how we might do things differently. And I'm wondering whether that intelligence of spirits has got a bit fed up with waiting for us to catch up, and is giving us a quiet nudge somewhere in the human anatomy to say, come on now, folks, it's time to be thinking and acting a bit differently. Not saying you've been doing it wrong, but have we all been doing things for the right reasons? Because when I look at the news, I don't want to get political, but when I've stopped watching a lot of the news now because it just, but anyway, I feel sometimes that I don't know what direction they, whoever they are trying to take us on, what journey. And I think there is something about us having to start taking the personal responsibility for what we do or don't believe. And remember that it's not about ego, it's about service to spirit. It's about the fact that we are a brotherhood of man. We share that same divine spark. And from that point, we are no different from each other, because that divine spark is unchanging. And it's the thing that holds the truth. And I think so often we hear so many different truths that it's quite difficult to know which is the right one or the cool one. And I think there's a lot to be said in looking within, exploring our own relationship with the divine, exploring our own relationship with spiritualism, to see how it leads us in our life and where it wants to take us. And we, to some extent, yes, we are all different. We although we share that divine spark, we do have the importance of individuality as well, which means that we can decide as an individual what our personal path is, what our personal responsibility is. But I fear that if we don't get it right, we'll see more and more illness, for want of a better word, inhabiting the world, threatening the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the oceans, Mother Earth. And somehow we've got to try and get that right. And I don't think that to do that, we can just go with repeating some of the hate messages that I see on social media and hear on social media. We have to be able to listen to each other, and not just listen, but actually hear what the other person is saying. We may not agree with them, but we need to try and find a common ground so that people aren't left feeling like they've been left behind or they don't matter. Everyone, everything on this planet matters. And it's about how each one takes that responsibility and uses it in a responsible way. Not for ego, not for greed, not for self-worth, but because it's the right thing to do to serve spiritualism, excuse me, and to serve the world that we live in. So, sorry, I'm nearly finished. So I've talked a lot about past pioneers generically, but there's a lot of current day pioneers as well who are talking a lot of sense, not just completely based on the 7 principles of old, but how we interpret the principles of the principles into current day practice and beliefs. You know, it's sometimes the way that mediums are trained, the way that we look at how healing is undertaken, the way we look at speaking mediumship, addresses like this, as well as obviously evidential messages as well, is all changing. But there are so many conflicting beliefs that even within the cause there is often, you know, an eternal fight going on about whose word is right, who's got the loudest voice or the greatest number of followers. What I'd suggest is we need to look inside our own relationship with our own spirit, our own soul, and our own God to decide how we want to take it forward. So what's been going on for me? A lot of inner work, and the fact that I've not been as in touch with people as I might have been otherwise has certainly given the impetus to do some deep soul searching. I'm not saying I'm completely right. I'm not saying I'm the only one who's right, though I am. But it is important, I think, to give ourselves the time and space to think really hard and challenge what we've always accepted as the truth and what eternal progression means for us, and personal responsibility means for us as individuals. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Denise. for that wonderful address. And I know that it's given us such a lot to think about. Thank you so much. That kept me gripped. I almost forgotten I was the chair lady. Nothing new there. Right, my second reading this evening is from In Tune with the Infinite, and it's by Ralph Waldo Trine, and it's just a verse, really, just a little verse, and it's about trying to put today behind us, not just today, but just in the sense of the word. And if we're lucky enough to have tomorrow and putting it all behind us and just starting again, and if we're lucky enough to have that chance, well, this is what we should remember. Every day is a fresh beginning. Every morn is the world made new. You who are weary of sorrow and sinning, there is hope for you. A hope for me and a hope for you. All the past things are past and over. The tasks are done and the tears are shed. Yesterday's errors let yesterday cover. Yesterday's wounds which smarted and bled are healed with the healing which the night has shed. Let go, since we cannot relieve them, cannot undo and cannot atone. God in his mercy receive, forgive them. Only the new days are our own. Today is ours, and today alone. Here are the skies all burnished brightly. Here is the spent earth all reborn. Here are the tired limbs springing lightly to face the sun and to share with the morn, in the chrism of the dew and the cool of the dawn. Every day a fresh beginning. Listen, my soul, to the glad refrain. And spite of old sorrow and older sinning, and puzzles forecasted and possible pain, take heart with the day and begin again. Thank you so much for listening. I'd like to thank our mediums who have served us so beautifully this evening. And just one tiny notice, if there are a few committee members here at the minute, so just briefly after the closing prayer, if there are any questions that you have for us, we will stay on just for a couple of minutes and try and help you out there. And now I'm going to ask Liz to give us our closing prayer. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. Divine Spirit, thank you for this service given in your name. Thank you for the love, the peace, and the acceptance we receive from you. For the company of our friends and of spirit, and the wisdom and joy they give to us. May the healing energy which has built up this evening by us all go onwards to give comfort to those who need it at this time. May our existence move upwards with grace and fortitude. Thank you for your presence within this your service. Amen.
Amen. Well, that does bring our first Zoom divine service to an end, and hopefully in the not too distant future we will all be together in church. So if you're not staying on for a couple of minutes, I'd just like to say good night, and we are so looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.